So, at R2i, it's really about data and insights with tech for us, right? I think what's most interesting about us is we're a really strong technical implementer, which you'll see on the next slide. But at our core is really creative. So it's around experiences for us, and experiences are generated through, really honestly, just understanding who our customers are, and we derive that, who our customers are, and we obviously derive that through data and data analysis. We have, a long history of partnering with our clients in, honestly, anywhere from data cleansing to a heavy CRM background, but most importantly, then taking what we learn and how do we practically apply that to really move the needle on our customers' really endpoints. Give me the next slide, Britt. Across, varying verticals, we practice the same set of solutions, right? And then really what we express differently is those experiences for our users by combining not just what we understand from, our customers, but our industry insights and knowledge across higher ed, healthcare, a ton right now in high tech, a lot of opportunity. Some of our digital laggards in manufacturing, really getting them in tune with, understanding what they have, and then how do we practically apply that as they really change their businesses from, working through others that rep their products to going mostly to direct to consumer. So, we have, varied experiences across industries, how we apply our trade in a similar way across each one. Next slide, Brittany. Oh, there we go. Told you.
So thanks, Michael. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and get some beers in hands before we kick off our data-driven panel today. So I am happy to introduce Patrick, who will take over our tasting from Trogs.
Thank you. Unfortunately, that picture adds about 20 years to my age. It looks like anyway, but Brittany, thank you so much for the time to do this. It's been awesome. The second session here. I got my start in IT out of college 25 years ago, and sitting through the last one of these, it's amazing how many acronyms you guys have, almost as many as we have in the beer industry. So it just kind of brought back a lot of memories. So and then on behalf of Hugh and Claire, and obviously myself, thank you for the time for this, because, Trogs, I won't speak for Devil's Backbone or Heavy Seas, but we only distribute about 10 states. We're from Massachusetts down to North Carolina, out to Ohio, no West Virginia, no Rhode Island. So those of you that are outside those markets that have our beers in hand, thank you, kudos. Hopefully, if you make it out this way, get to the brewery. So I've been in the industry for about 12 years, worked for a couple breweries, Dogfish, Trogs. I've worked for a wholesaler. So I've got a lot of extensive experience. So harkening back to Trogs, we were started, it'll be 25 years next year. We'll celebrate our anniversary. We're the 17th largest craft brewery in the country. And again, we only distribute in 10 states, which makes us the second smallest brewery in the top 50. The only one smaller than us is New Glarus out of Wisconsin, because they drink a lot of beer out in Wisconsin. So if anybody's had the Spotted Cow, that's probably their flagship. Go ahead and get it. It's pretty tasty. So again, we started 25 years ago, two brothers, Chris and John Trogner. The name Trogs comes from an amalgamation of the word Krog, which is Flemish for pub, and then their last name's Trog, Trogner, and we just kind of put it together. So as far as we know, we think we're the only brewery in the country with an umlaut, which kind of sets us apart as well. So really excited about that. Our brewery last year, before COVID shut down, was voted #1 brewery tour in the country by USA Today. And again, like I said, we only distribute in 10 states. So to have that kind of accolade for a nationwide publication with such a small footprint for us, which is truly amazing for us. So please, if you can, get up to Hershey and see us. Our Hershey location gets us to about 500,000 barrels, the current footprint. We're going to do about 115,000 barrels this year, which would give us about a 4% increase over 2020. From there, we actually started down in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Like I said, about 25 years ago, and in about 2010, we moved up to the Hershey place that we're at right now. It used to be an old Hershey warehouse building, and we actually just bought out the rights this summer. So now the complex is completely 100% Trogues owned. So we are very excited about that. Let's move on to the beers. So the first one we've got is called our Sunshine Pilsner. It is a German style Pilsner with brewed with traditional Czech hops, which are Saaz and Hersbrucker. Kind of give it that earthy, malty, spicy feel to it. You can see it's a nice crystal golden clear color, has a nice frothy head, comes in about 4.5%. Great lawn mowing beer if you ever get a chance to go out and mow the lawn and want to introduce some alcohol into that activity. So it's a really delicious beer. Just go ahead and give it a taste. Should go really well with that tart cookie if you still have it available. The thing about our Sunshine is we actually use an old world process called krausening, where we basically take the first fermentation and we move that, well, the first wort, and then we move that over into fermentation. And then about 2 weeks later, we have a fresh batch of Pilsner wort before it moves out of the brew house. And we take about 15% of that wort with the active yeast, and then we throw it into the 2-week-old fermenting, which kind of helps boost the carbonation. It also kind of gives the malt a little bit more backbone, and as we like to say, a little bit more time to shine, which gives it that earthy feel. So again, this was a seasonal for us about 6 or 7 years ago, and it was our number 2 brand by volume with only a 4-month window of sales. So we decided to bring it up to the varsity level and put it in our core lineup, and it's been a hit ever since. So enjoy the Pilsner. Next one, which I'll crack a little later. This one's called Lucky Holler. And this is our current fall seasonal. It is a hazy IPA coming in at about 6.8%. Galaxy, Simcoe, and Citra hops kind of give it a lot of pineapple, maybe some gumball notes to it as well, some juiciness. Does have a little bit of haze to that as well. Drinks very smooth. We introduced it last year. It was huge for us, and we're having a very good year again with it this year. So we're excited about that. The name Lucky Holler comes from when our brewmasters were out in the Pacific Northwest. They were looking through the hop fields and they came across an experimental hop. And as they're sitting in the field all spread out, they're kind of hollering at each other to come over and check out the hops. It also has a double standard name, where if you're familiar with West Virginia, where the mountains come together, they're kind of called hollers, and the townsfolk used to scream at each other in these little ravines, and they call it a holler. So again, the excitement over the hops, the flavor, the profile makes it worth our while calling it our Lucky Holler. So we're really excited about that. So if you have any questions, speak up. I'm willing to answer anything you need. And please, again, if you can, get up to the brewery.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. It seems like we'll need everyone to loosen up a little bit before we see some questions, but I did put a little note in the chat just to encourage everyone, if you want to enter anything in the chat to ask of our beer experts today or our panel, feel free, and or always feel free to unmute yourselves and chat live. So thanks so much for that kickoff. So without further ado, I will start things off with our data-driven panel today. We have 3 awesome speakers joining us, which David Hegarty, our Senior Director of Solutions, will moderate today, and I will give everyone an opportunity to do a short introduction of themselves and turn things over to David.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm, very excited about this conversation today because I'm joined with 3 people in particular that I highly admire. One who works at a global investment management firm, and we're going to talk a lot about how data drives engagement. But imagine if you had $500 billion in assets under management and you had to develop relationships where you had to produce a return that was very meaningful to not just your organization, but the globe in general, right? If they make a mistake where Coley works, bad things happen all across the globe, truthfully speaking, to many people. So data drives the decisions they make, and that's why they're so well known at AllianceBernstein. And then the same applies for Delta Dental, where they need to know the information about your dental health in general over the course of your life, so that they can be prescriptive, if you will, and the right recommendations they make as you continue that health later on in life. But more importantly, with their model, can they find a dentist or insurance? Separate models, but can they find a dentist local, right? So now they're taking that same data-driven approach and seeing if they can engage at the local level, but on the flip side of it, if you will, use that data to maybe possibly help them find a better insurance product. And then we have my colleague in architecture, colleague over at Adobe, Hoon, and Hoon and I are going to hopefully have a conversation around how do those organizations facilitate the goals, right? Of having 500 billion in asset and making smart decisions to produce greater return, or having a North American presence with the dental insurance market and producing a high quality of service, while also basically being able to extend the conversation, if you will. Dentistry, if any of you have been to a dentist, is sometimes not the greatest thing in the world, and Delta does a great job of having people come back, which says a lot about what they do. So with that, I'd like to open up the floor and see if maybe Coley, we've talked a lot about this idea of how data drives investment decisions, right? And you've done that at Alliance Bernstein for quite some time. Are you using the same sort of research methodology on the technical marketing side, or could you talk a little bit about that? How are you looking at data and then acting upon it?
Sure. So, it's a little bit different on the customer side, right? In fact, what we're trying to do is take a customer lens, just like many of you who work for consumer facing businesses, to a B2B business. So we're really trying to understand our target audience. Let's take for a second, the US retail advisor market. So we're trying to understand each advisor, understand their preferences, behaviors, and then present them with a relevant series of discussions online that link up to their discussions with us in person and events we invite them to, et cetera. And so we're really trying to consumerize that whole engagement model with us. And so we're using data to do that, understanding what we know about them, but also what's available in the marketplace around them. So there's lots of data that you can buy, data packs, et cetera, that help us understand their investment profiles, and then also understand their behaviors online from what we can see, observe, and then how we use third-party data to help us find them and engage with them.
So Scott, I can't help but, and maybe it's me, but I see the advisors, right? So what Coley and team are doing at Alliance Bernstein is feeding a business that then feeds a market, right? In many ways, correct me if I'm wrong, Coley, right? The research goes to maybe a different type of financial institution, which then does some action, right? Takes action with that output or input. I think the same applies in many ways, Scott, right? For what Delta is doing and maybe what you're doing with information technology, pushing down, if you will, to the local branch. It's maybe not the same model and 100% separate, but do you see a connection there as well, having that sort of business to consumer model with the way you guys have rolled out your tech?
Yeah, it is. And you're kind of thinking about our business model. We're kind of our triangle really is employers. Our largest group of businesses selling to your company, and your company would give you benefits, and you'd be able to have Delta Dental, et cetera. The dentists themselves. So cultivating a network of dentists that hopefully you get the one that's close to you and that you like, and then you as a consumer, you have an experience with the brand. You engage with digital assets of ours. And for that market that isn't part of the employer group, we want to sell and enrich that. And so, capturing the data from all those spaces, looking at it from a national macro level, and being able to then funnel it at that local market level where it could synthesize and make sense, super important for our business. And where there's another aspect of that too, in terms of other business integration areas or things like medical dental integration. The mouth is connected with so many aspects of the overall body and overall health. If we could find and generate better ways to connect what we have today in the dental space with that medical space too, we could create better opportunities and better options for anyone in our triangle of market spaces there.
So I like that, Hugh, that the triangle of market spaces, right? And
yeah, I just created new synergy of words over here, I guess.
Well, I was trying not to feed Patrick. But there's definitely an acronym there. I mean, for me, that's data, content, and delivery, right? 100%. Something we speak about a lot when we talk with our Adobe peers. Maybe you could help us put that together now. How do you take that triangle, that business to consumer model, and then activate that, Hune, on a stack like Adobe provides?
Yeah, no, thank you, David. And I think the big takeaway here is that whether it be financial services or something business to business, or we move to something that's more business to consumer or healthcare or even provider centric, there's something for everyone. And if you distill that even further to more simplistic terms, it's really about data and content, data with input, content, and output. And if we get all that data organized, that data cleansed, that data qualified, that data standardized, and we get that into one repository, one source of truth, a place to where we know that everything is valid, everything is up to date, everything is usable, and then connect it to these outputs. Is it advertising? Is it site-side personalization? Is it offline now? As we know, technology has changed so much to where even our phones, our cars, our charging stations, there's just different ways to interact and message. And it's really just about delivering these experiences. And for Adobe and the Experience Cloud, it's really trying to create and continue to deliver on these experiences to personalize to each unique user, to each unique entity, and meet them at where they are within either the purchase journey or the selection of a dentist or even the selection of a financial package or a financial product suite that makes sense for where they are. But it's really understanding that we're all unique individuals, and therefore what we experience should also be tailored to who we are as individuals.
Well, I think who we are as individuals is, for me, the most important thing. Moving on, most of us grew up in sort of a one-to-many to one-to-few to one-to-one world of marketing. We live now, I believe, in the hyper one-to-one, the people-based marketing world. I mean that explicitly in the sense that if cookies go away or if some sort of token is removed and we're now identifiable, we should theoretically be able to communicate with each other better, right? Because we have these assets and these elements or these preferences that we can act upon. But I think this idea, and I'd like to go back to Coley, which is, it's not, I mean, the technology hopefully is there, but Coley, it's not so simple to know that I like a peanut butter cup on a Friday, and now you can predict with regards to what AllianceBernstein does with the stack. Could you talk to us a little bit? Because, you know, this idea of someone who's selling research to Citibank, right? Your customers are the biggest retail banks in the world in many cases, if not, they're hedge funds. Again, $500 million in assets under management. Talk to us a little bit about that, because it's far more sophisticated, right? Because as is, I think, predicting dental coverage. But let's start with this idea of how do you guys use the stack to do a very complex customer journey?
Yeah, and I'm going to step back and just clarify our business model because it's complicated. And actually, I thought that Scott did a nice job on his sort of B2B to C and the triangle of relationships. So our business, we have three main businesses at AllianceBernstein. We have the sell side, which is the research business you're talking about, which is the Bernstein side of, or was historically the Bernstein side. We have a private wealth business, which is where we handle high net worth customers directly. And then we have the business I'm talking about, which is our intermediated business. It's our retail business globally, where we distribute asset management products like mutual funds, separately managed accounts, other things through financial advisors to customers, as well as directly to institutions. So public pensions, sovereign wealth funds, et cetera. So when I talk about the retail advisor space, actually, it's very much similar to the model that Scott talked about. You think about, we're selling to like a home office, a Merrill Lynch, a Morgan Stanley, a UBS, many of the brands you guys will be familiar with, that they make a decision at a home, what we call a home office level, to put a product on a platform. And you have an advisor who has an end customer who's investing their money, and they're making a decision based on what's on the platform on what to recommend. So we have to sell all the way through that process, right? To the home office, the advisor, and the end customers be comfortable, right? So it's very similar to, if you think about a pharmaceutical sale, where they market to end customers, so the end customer requests the product from the doctor to prescribe it, as opposed, or at least is accepting when the doctor prescribes it, as opposed to be unaware. So anyway, that's the value chain. I just wanted to step back and level set on that. And so when we're thinking about how we market to an advisor, yeah, it's not the same as buying a sweater, right? So if you came to my site and you looked at a sweater, I'm not going to follow you around with that sweater and hope eventually that you click on and buy buy that sweater. And then oftentimes when you click on that sweater, it's out of stock, or you've already bought the sweater and it's still following you around. That's not what we're doing, right? So we're continuing this, and I think Hoon said it really well, right? We're continuing this dialogue with them. So we want to be able to identify, hopefully based on characteristics we already know, who they are and what they're interested in, and then continue that dialogue with them around new information that is relevant, that then proceeds them along to making an investment decision that uses our products, which they don't click to buy like on our site, but they go through their own atmosphere. So we're bringing together, if you think about that, like what we know about the customer and their structure and what they have available to them, along with third-party data we can get that helps us understand what else might be interesting to them. And then we have to bring the acquisition, right? So we're like, I really manage and measure, can we activate the customer? Can we engage the customer? And then actually, can we acquire them? And can we look at what sales flows, et cetera, are with that customer, and then understand those behaviors and how they transcend to customers that look like them, right? And so that's really what we're trying to do.
And is that mostly email in your world, or is it a combination of in-app? Like, could you speak to us a little bit about the
We're using
delivery now?
across, like a really robust sort of cross-channel, and ideally, and again, I'm talking about things that to some degree we're delivering on, and to some degree we want to deliver on, right? No one's all the way there yet. But I'll just take this very specific example where we created a pool of 35,000 advisors. We have found them all digitally, right? So we can reach them obviously through email, but we have also found them, we can reach them through search, we can reach them through display. We are trying to drive them to a personalized site, right? So where when they get to our site, it's personalized and relevant. It shows them other things that are, even if we don't know that it's, Coley, we know it, that like what this person did before, and therefore can present relevant things to them. So we're following that like email, digital journey, and then like they could call us, we could call them if they identify themselves. We use social, right? We're using a variety of digital channels as well as, one-to-one, analog channels to reach them.
So, and I'm glad you went, and thank you for the analog at the end, because the first question I was going to ask Scott was, which goes first? Do you start with the analog and the physical location and direct mail, or do you start with something digital, or is it a hybrid? How do you take that same model now, Scott, of engagement? Again, you're not, and I love the analogy, Cole. You're not following me around with a sweater, right? You're trying to present to me either insurance or a combination of insurance and dental coverage at a local location. So how do you not basically sell me insurance when I bought it?
Yeah, so the top level answer is it's not easy for us to get there. We are federated as well, so we have 39 independent deltas trying to operate across all these states. As a consumer, you have no idea. I don't care. Why do I live in Illinois and I have Delta in Wisconsin? Well, you do, So how do we even work that additional dynamic that's out there? And the end goal is that from a consumer experience point of view, we're trying to make that as seamless as possible. We're trying to prevent that sales piece that happens. And we are finding ways to manage against it. But it's a lot of work, giving that federated deal and the amount of data and the amount of fueling of that it takes place. So it's both physical, it's both physical and digital for us to get there. On the digital side, we're doing some SEO methods on the top level through the different search engines. And then we traverse that into Adobe Experience Manager to try to decipher what type of user we're dealing with. Is it that employer? Is it that dentist? Is it just the consumer wanting to check their benefits? And then how could we just remember that's who they are? And from an end user point of view, you better get it right, because they're not gonna be happy when you don't. That's the high level expectation with experience and those types of things. And then we're also trying to manage against it, as I mentioned, on the physical side. You live in the state of Wisconsin, but you're getting a sales piece from Delta Dental Wisconsin, but you have Delta Dental Illinois already. Why are you reaching out to me? I already have you. Why do you not know this? And so from a brand point of view, we look stupid, and it's a double spend, right? So there's ways that we could synthesize that and eliminate the brand duping that we're doing, as well as, creating that expected experience for the consumer. But it's all data driven. It's just trying to find those different aspects and different tools and capabilities that can help us get there. But it's a challenge. It's something we literally talk about every day to manage against, both from a cost point of view, experience point of view, and bottom line business side.
And Hune, that really, like, we live here, I live here in New England, where the Farmer's Almanac is a very important part of sort of the tradition of fall. You buy this little magazine, if you will, and it tells you essentially if there's going to be a ski season or not. And in my case, you're either very happy or you're very sad. And that is a newspaper, if you will, that's been written for over 200 plus years. And it's only going back doing what we're talking about now, right? This idea of taking something physical, looking at the trend, and then trying to predict as best we can. How do we at Adobe and R2i, how do we as an infrastructure, if you will, of technologists continue, or better yet, I should say, how do you see us providing this idea of omni-channel, right, engagement, but this idea that Coley and Scott are both touching on, which is some level of empathy, right? I think what Scott just referred to is very interesting around the concept of marketing with empathy. Maybe you could speak to that if you don't mind.
Yeah, I actually like that. Empathy is not really a word that you hear in regards to both data and marketing, but I love what Coley was touching upon earlier as well, with just there's so much that goes on, and then there are so many channels everywhere, and we were talking about that before. And for me, it really goes back to data. And in the past, especially in the past 2 years, as everything has been changing so much in the landscape, we've seen Apple redefine how data and privacy works within their ecosystem. Google has also done their version of that within their ecosystem. And I think that has caused shockwaves everywhere. So we have the brands, we have the partners, we have these different technologists within these organizations figuring out, what do we do? What do we make of this? And even with data, I think this has really put us in a place to reevaluate and shift that perspective on how do we look at data. And for myself, and even for us at Adobe, when we talk to others, we just want to say data is just information, and any information from either your customers or your prospects or your properties, that should first be captured and identified. And we should be able to utilize that in a way to where it can help you, because it's a two-pronged battle, right? Where we have to first know what's out there. And then once it's there, then we can figure out what to do with it. And then once those data pieces come in, then we can figure out things like, is it a location-based thing? Is it a statewide thing? And I know being in California and even learning about the nuances of health insurance, which is probably closely tied with the dental world, what's relevant to me in California, whether it be the provider name or the dentist name and the procedure name, that's not going to matter in Wisconsin or Illinois. And then the same thing goes for the financial packages, to where if I'm interested in purchasing, let's say, an IRA, I probably don't need to see other things, or I probably don't need to be approached as a large multinational corporation trying to invest in bonds. And even being able to distinguish that goes a long way. The sweater analogy I actually like. So this is probably an example that always sticks to me, is where I will browse something, let's say on apple.com, and order an iPhone or browse these iPhones. An hour later, I leave apple.com to go to a site like CNET. I am bombarded with Apple ads, whether it's on the banner side or whether I'm watching these CNET videos in stream. So I'm going to buy that iPhone. And so for Apple and for this campaign, that's a win. What happens 2 hours later is I'm going back to, let's say, Mashable or the New York Times, and I'm still bombarded with Apple iPhone ads. And for me, it's more of okay, I'm going to tune out now. And now we're starting to see a drop off in either brand engagement or efficiencies, when that could have been an opportunity to show me AirPods. That could have been an opportunity to show me an iPad. That could have been an opportunity to get me further hooked into the ecosystem and derive more customer value. But that scenario applies everywhere, to where with the empathy piece, where again, and I speak as a non-dentist or a non-expert in the field of dentistry, but you can imagine if I'm just going in for 6-month checkups, then I probably am looking for a very different type of experience with both my insurance and my dentist, versus someone who might be older, who either needs more work or looks at different products or asks a different set of questions. And just even starting there, if I go on and I see an ad or a message or an email saying, hey, do you want dentures? I'll probably say no. And you're probably not the right dentist for me. But if it's someone like my grandparents or my parents, and they're going on and they see these things, they'll say, this is relevant, or there's guidance on how to use this. And so whether or not we ultimately convert, that's its own battle in and of itself. But even to get to that point to where they can make that decision, we have to piece everything in and make people feel like people. And within the Experience Cloud, we have those tools in place, whether it's, again, that data layer or the activation layer, or people have probably likely heard of something like Adobe Analytics, where we're analyzing all these touch points and figuring out what's working, what's not working. And then we can make those adjustments. Then we can make those corrections. Then we can see things like Wisconsin. People don't want to see Wisconsin. People don't want to see things by state. Maybe people want to see things by city. People don't want to see an image of a screw or a sharp tool. Let's take it out. And so those things. And the others might say, we want to see an image of the dentist, or we want to see an image of Novocaine. For whatever reason, you can start doing these things to help improve that experience and really distill from data to information to the experience and execution. And again, for our story, the past 14 years with the Experience Cloud, this is something that we are so passionate about. And this is something that we ultimately drive for in working with brands like everyone on this call, and then strategic partners like R2i to help bring this to light. And it's something that everybody needs each other in, like that triangle example. This is also a triangle to where the strategic partners, the technology providers, and the end clients, we all have to work together to achieve these outcomes.
Well said. Well said. And then, empathy and compassion are a perfect time, I think, Brittany, to bring our good friends from the beer manufacturers back. I don't know who's up next, Brittany, but I imagine it might be Patrick. Nope, it's going to be Claire, I believe. Yeah.
Claire? Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like a great time for a break.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, nothing like transitioning from Novocaine into beer.
Another form of Novocaine.
Just a different type of, something to make you feel good. I'm Claire Ainsworth. I am with Devil's Backbone. I've been a part of Devil's Backbone for almost 4 years, and I've been in the beer industry for about 12 years, same as Pat. I actually started in wine sales and production, and one of my favorite things to tell people is that beer is such a communal system. I've had plenty of beers from both Pat's breweries and from Hugh's breweries. It's all one big family, a lot of recipe sharing, a lot of great support in the community. I've been fortunate myself to be a part of every aspect of the beer business, from production and brewing all the way into sales and marketing and product development. Devil's Backbone is based in Virginia's heartland. We are coming up on 13 years old. Our anniversary is coming up in November. And for those of you not familiar with the Virginia geography, we coined the term Virginia Heartland. We're about 45 minutes southwest of Charlottesville, Virginia. And we opened up this beautiful facility after our owners, Steve and Heidi Crandall, former owners, Steve and Heidi Crandall, took a trip to ski in the Swiss Alps. They fell in love with the scenery, and they opened up a brewery at the base of a ski resort, Wintergreen Ski Resort, for anybody who is interested in a nice Virginia ski trip. That beautiful facility, we've got a full functioning brewery and restaurant. Our headquarters is there. We also have a distillery on site, as well as a whiskey and cigar lounge. There's 90 acres in which you can camp. It's just a tremendously relaxing and beautiful facility. We love to encourage people to slow down. We are a lager brewery. Lagers are a slower process in the making. So typically your beers are either ales or lagers. Lagers, that production process takes a little bit longer, maybe 5 or 6 weeks, whereas an ale will take closer to 2 weeks, generally speaking. I definitely can't speak for my friends at Heavy Seas and Trogs on their production times. But we opened up a production facility just over the mountains in Lexington, Virginia. Some of you may be familiar with that. That is where VMI is based. And 90% of the beers we make actually come out of that facility. So Virginia is our home. We distribute both canned cocktails and beer, anywhere from Maine down to Georgia, Tennessee being about as far west as we go, and just a little bit in West Virginia as well. But the most important thing we're all here for is the beers. And one of the things that has made all of those beautiful properties, restaurants possible is our flagship beer, Vienna Lager. Vienna Lager is not the most creative name we could have come up with. It is named after the style, Vienna style lager. It's very amber in color, a little bit caramel, some toasted notes, a little bit of sweetness. And my favorite thing about this style is that it has a wide range of appeal. This is a perfect beer, football, nachos beer. And as well, it can go with your higher end meals if you so choose to have a beer with them. So I'll let you guys taste a little bit of what made Devil's Backbone, Devil's Backbone. And of course, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to try and answer them. Some of you guys may be familiar with the style of beer. For those of you that aren't, some other famous Vienna style lagers are Sam Adams Boston Lager, Yingling, and those of you in the Midwest that are familiar with Great Lakes Brewing Company, Elliott Ness is also the same style. The other beer that you guys get to try, and I unfortunately haven't even gotten my hands on it because it is so new, is Naughty and Nice. This is a cold IPA, so similar to Vienna Lager, which is fermented at a cold temperature. This is an IPA fermented at a cold temperature. Naughty or Nice is a brand new beer to us. This is the first time we've ever made it. You guys are getting it. I think it's been in market for about a week. So brand spanking new. This beer comes in about 7.1%, and we're using some really citrus forward hops and some really bright hops. So you should be getting a little bit of lemon on that Naughty or Nice, a little bit of orange, grapefruit, maybe even hints of tropical fruit, but just a really easy drinking, not super duper bitter, but you'll get a nice little bit of that, somewhat bitter grapefruit rind, just a really easy drinking new style of beer. And if any of you guys are ever interested in going down to Devil's Backbone, again, it's a beautiful place to unplug, unwind, slow down for a little bit. And we have a ton of breweries on the same road. It's just a really great experience, but I'm super happy to answer any questions if you guys have.
When you say it's a cold IPA, are you using a lager yeast?
We are using a lager yeast in this one, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Sort of like an IPL.
Yeah, actually, so it's when I asked our brewer, Jason Oliver, in the development of this product, we've actually tried IPLs, we've tried hoppy lagers, and there's no difference in the production of the product. So if you guys are familiar with IPLs or cold IPAs, this is more of the style of beer that has been created doesn't quite have the right name to get it to the audience we wanted it to. So we went with cold IPA this time around. I've always enjoyed the IPLs and hoppy lagers that we've made and that lots of our other breweries have made. But this is just us trying to make sure we hit the right consumer while naming the beer somewhat appropriately.
Cool.
I guess that's it on questions.
Little quiet, I guess. Thanks, Claire. That was awesome.
Brittany, do you want me to jump back in for about we got a few more minutes, maybe, I don't know, 5 or so minutes, right? And then we could do our third beer and then maybe open up for questions. Will that work? Or do you want to roll? What would you like to do?
Yeah, that would be great. Let's jump back into our panel for just a few minutes and then we'll move on to our third taste.
Excellent. So as we're transitioning, if you maybe, I don't think we need to see the slide of our pictures, but we could talk to it. So Naughty or Nice, it's a great segue for data. Are you using data efficiently? Are you using it appropriately? And are you using it in the appropriate fashion that it was intended for? So I'll start with Scott in this one. You work in an interesting world, Scott, where you have products that are being per insurance, right? The idea of dental insurance. But then you're also providing the service the insurance to some extent covers, right? And I don't mean this in a conflict of interest, but you know a lot about the braces I had or the teeth that chipped when I was a boxer, when I was young, and so on and so forth, right? But you also have historical data around my health related to, because of my age, maybe a health screening I had to take. How is it that you balance that as someone who's a chief information data and tech person, generally speaking, but also an officer at the C level at Delta? How do you balance that where you have a lot of information and some of it isn't necessarily always usable, but sometimes you still need to keep it, if that makes sense? And how do you go about protecting Delta? Because when protecting Delta's data, right, you can then protect the person downstream.
Yeah, well, short answer is it's not easy either. And the Naughty or Nice question is something that we do ask ourselves almost every day with our friends at legal and compliance as it relates to the data. Yeah. And one side of it that's been out there for a number of years that people have been fighting with is in the cyber risk space, and that's obviously a challenge. And then most recently in the privacy space and trying to adhere to some of the regulation pieces that are out and about too. And then the reality is on the business side, the better data you have, the more you could use, the more opportunity you have for an improved user experience. So that's the challenge of trying to navigate all those different vectors of complication, trying to achieve the right business outcome and manage against the risk. So what are some ways that we manage against that? First and foremost, bringing in the right experts to help us get through it. That naughty or nice question as it relates to data isn't black and white. There's a lot of gray in there, and we spend a lot of time trying to decipher and unwind that, make sure it's a good spot. We try to get creative and sophisticated on individual data and thinking about, think of your ID cards in the medical space or dental space. You used to be across the board socials, right? So move away from that. You have less identifiers for people. So what are some more sophisticated ways that you could do it to normalize that information and then in turn create that improved experience for the person? So that's just an example of trying to not use data, but also deliver on the business outcome, and being able to match data in a way that can kind of get you there. And so there are a lot of creative things, capabilities, and tools that exist that could do it. But it's something that as a technology leader that you need to stay actively engaged with on a very often basis, bring in the right partners to help you and really try to maneuver through it on all aspects. And then I think the important part though is that we continue to stay in tune with that business outcome and measure that we're progressing. If we're not delivering that either, then our business model starts to fray and fracture. And so we need to make sure that we're ensuring that people are getting their product suites, they're experiencing it the right way, the way they want to see it too. So those are, a few specifics on some methods that we've tried to get there.
That was tremendous. You touched on a lot of things there that I was hoping we could speak about, but you started with the data layer, the idea of taking an identifiable number, or for that matter, an identifiable data element, which is my social, and removing that from the equation, right? By virtue of doing that, you've provided Delta Dental maybe most likely a more unique way of managing it, but you've also protected them from risk. And by virtue, you've protected the patients and the consumers from risk, right? Because now that's been removed, at least in the identifiable structure, right? Which brings me to Coley in the sense of, so we just talked a lot about data efficiency there, Scott, right? And how are you using data in your case, in a nice way? In Coley's world, she again has these 3 different business units. They're using data nicely, but how difficult, or what are you doing to sort of find that efficiency, if you will, Coley, in providing the right business unit? Now, in your case, it might be very specific, smaller products, but how do you use it in a nice manner, but still maintain, if you will, that historical data, right? To give you insights. Is it one system or many? Yeah, sorry.
I think it's this point about relevancy and customer, I was going to say advocacy, but I think Scott had a better word in terms of empathy, right? Which is you want to be using the right data at the right moment in time in a way that's not intrusive or creepy, but is actually valuable. And, early years ago, I had someone on my team who we were at a meeting with a bunch of senior executives with a different company, but same industry. And they were like, isn't it weird if we personalize things? And the person on my team said, oh my goodness, if I don't get anything, if it doesn't start out and it doesn't address me by name, I actually don't want to read it. Like with all of this that exists, I expect you to know who I am. And I always think about the future. When we talk about a cookieless future, I often think about, actually, I just want to carry my cookie around and decide who I want to share the cookie with, right? And if you're going to use the data in some way that's meaningful to me and make my engagement with you and your solutions better, I'm all for it. If you're going to use it and track me around, we're going back to the sweater, and I've already bought the sweater, or you don't have the sweater anymore, like stop showing me the sweater, right? So it is about that respect. I think empathy was a good word for it, and like really knowing the customer well enough to use the data appropriately. Maybe there are some customers who say, I don't want you to know me, right? And they give you signals like don't email me, or they give you a signal like I don't want your cookies, right? Then respect that too, right? And so I think it is understanding the different customers, and that's the benefit of all this. I know when we were talking about segmenting customers earlier, you were talking about like location and you're talking about age, and I just think there's so many behavioral things that we can pick up about customers that we can complement that with, that we should take as signals so we can respectfully engage them in a way that meaningfully advances what they're trying to achieve and our business objectives at the same time.
And so, Yoon, for me, that right now is what we at R2i are really focused on, is how do we activate behavioral right? And intent signals, Adobe Analytics. How do I enable Coley to understand that this process predictably does the following? Or in Scott's case, if you're coming for a cleaning, you're going to do the following, and there's this sort of roadmap of 3 months. But what happens when the data capture provides behavioral or intent signals?
Yes.
And now you know that maybe you moved up your dentist appointment, and therefore the next best action changes. Or in Coley's case, it's a far more complex business conversation, right, about what's next. So maybe you could quickly talk around how with AEP in particular, we're really enabling that suppression and empathetic, compassionate marketing that we speak of.
Oh, that sounds good, David. And yes, you took the words out of my mouth. And so for those in the audience, AEP, we love our acronyms at Adobe, so apologies in advance. It is short for the Adobe Experience Platform, which does two things. First and foremost, it acts as that data layer and data lake to take in information from all sources. So the scenarios that Scott and Coley had both described, whether it's information about these users, so it could be about myself, the work I've done, the products I've purchased, how often I've seen the dentist. Social will be stripped as made in his example, or what Coley's talking about, just all these signals. Maybe I am reading about everything across the board in the financial circle, or I'm reading about everything and anything. And you need two things there. Analytics is able to capture what's going on. Am I reading it on a desktop? Am I looking at this in my app? Am I scrolling? How long am I on these pages? And then the artificial intelligence machine learning piece that Experience Platform provides, it can actually decipher or look into, what does this actually mean for intent? Is this someone that's just curious about these things and doesn't really plan on becoming a prospect or a lead worth your time? Or is this someone that we should get in front of? Should our salespeople call ASAP? Should we send this welcome email and at least present that quote unquote sweater, and then only show them the sweater if they're interested versus dangling it 24/7? Or do we have to find new things? And this is such a dynamic and fluid process to where we talked about relevancy and what was working last year, what was working yesterday, what was working today. Those things are all three different instances, and it's the information needs to be collected and updated. And then the intelligence also needs to respond. And the Experience Platform is holding all of that. Then you want to do something with all of that, because the reports are nice, but if you see these reports 3 months after a campaign's ended, it's just really a great study or a post-mortem. What can you actually do while this campaign is live? What can you actually do as you're in your quarterly push? Okay, we see this. We see that we want to target this group of people, or we see that these states are just not having applicants or having people go to the dentist. Maybe it's the weather. Let's shut off activities here. Let's personalize differently. Let's move everything to these states. And I think that's where the Experience Platform is able to give you both. And fun fact, to where it's for everyone. So I mean that to where you're going to have your power users, you're going to have your engineers, you're going to have your data scientists that say, I just want to dive into the code and I just want to live in the API world. But you might also have your marketers who say, I don't do any of that. I just want to deliver messages. I just want to make sure that these site experiences are serving. There's something in there for them. And then the last thing I'll touch upon, I love the naughty and nice segue into this, because all things data and all things just Adobe as a company with data, first off, all the data is yours. So as the customer and as the client, all the data is yours. And what you do with the data is at your discretion. We are super transparent about that. And we have pages from the privacy side to explaining how things are collected, how things are used, to make sure you understand exactly what's happening there. And then the other part of it too is, for any technology stack or for any type of product that you purchase, it's probably good to invest in a set of solutions or a solution that's thinking ahead. So a great example is, again, the third-party cookie, just that landscape changing based on what Apple and Google have done. We were thinking about this as early as 2019. So it wasn't just 2020 is here or the announcement came out. What do? We saw this given that one of our top selling products, Audience Manager, was dependent upon third-party cookies. Seeing that, we still built out and rolled out the Experience Platform to accommodate and adjust for these changes and make sure that anyone that's using the Experience Cloud can seamlessly transition or have an exit plan in place if things move, versus going, What do we do now? Oh no, we have to start from square one. And that's something with any tech stack. And R2i has been a big part of this partnership and a big part of the story to where we go in together. So R2i may say, they're using these things or they're doing these things and they're thinking about these things. And we'll say, okay, here's what's happening. Here's what we think. What can we do together? And you as the brands and as the end customers, we want to make sure that you're always in that position to succeed, especially with these data and activation layers. And so those are a few things that do come to mind with the experience platform.
That was tremendous, Yoon. And now I'm going to use the data of the intent signals to be naughty and say we should probably have another beer. What do you think, Hugh? What do you think, Brittany? Should we?
Works for me.
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. My name is Hugh Sisson. I'm the founder of Heavy Seas Beer. We're in Baltimore. We are going to close out 26 years of operations this December. Before that, my family was in the bar business, and our place became the first brew pub in the state of Maryland. So I'm 32 years into the industry, and I have to admit I've had a great run. It's been a wonderful, very rewarding career. Got a couple of things to taste with you. First, we have our hazy Cannon, which is our hazy style IPA. Our brand has been built largely on making very big, flavorful IPA style beers. Loose Cannon is our flagship beer, so we kind of have a whole Cannon family. So hazy Cannon is where that name comes from. And as you can see, it's definitely a hazy style beer. Hazy's kind of got some momentum, I guess, beginning about 6 or 7 years ago. In New England, they started producing them. A lot of the smaller breweries were doing them because they didn't have filtration. So they turned something that was a liability into an asset, and the public bought into it, which left the rest of us who are larger scale and, tried to focus on making clear beer. How do we now undo what would normally be the process we would follow? So you wanted to make a hazy style because that's what the consumer wanted, but you didn't want it to have a half an inch of sludge in the bottom of the glass after a half an hour. So that was the challenge there. Try this one. It's really amazingly soft and rounded and good. So that's the hazy Cannon. Now, this is a new beer. We were supposed to have the Greater Pumpkin, which is our pumpkin ale, but unfortunately, that's gone. So we decided for the fall theme, we'd bring you Dark Anchor, which is a new English style porter. Porter is sort of an interesting beer style that everybody tries to say, what the hell is the difference between a stout and a porter? And from a technical standpoint, the bitterness in a stout comes from the use of black barley, which is a very bitter malt compound. And the bitterness in a porter comes from the use of hops. The truth of the matter is that's all been so muddied, nobody really gives a damn anymore. Basically, if a brewery makes both a porter and a stout, the stout will be the heavier of the two beers. So what the hell? Anyway, England is really where this style was originated. And I really believe that a porter should not be an overly hoppy beer. And so we really made this in the classic English style using English malts and English hops. And this is perfect for a crisp day. Envision a football game going on in the background, a nice wedge of really good cheddar and or Stilton cheese with some crusty ass French bread and a little bit of a fire going on the side, and then pour a glass of this stuff and settle in for the afternoon. So cheers. Questions, anyone? If not, I'm finishing my beer.
What's the ABV on that, Hugh?
The porter is about 6.5.
Ooh, nice.
Yep, 6.8. And the IPA was 7.25.
How does
A little bit of
ACG
test alcohol by volume.
No,
It's our
how
data.
does that relate to flavor in a beer? Or is it just, you put a higher ABV in there just for a little more horsepower?
No, it's not really that. It directly correlates to flavor profile. So in order to raise the ABV, you have to use more malt.
which means you're going to have a richer overall flavor profile. We've kind of been, the reason you want to know the ABV above and beyond the obvious, you want to know how careful you or how prudent you should be, is it just going to give you an indication as to the richness of the flavor profile. So probably when you just stepped off the tennis court, you're not looking for a 7.5% beer. But on a chilly day, a nice 6 or 7% or even 8% dark beer can be perfect. It also gives you an idea as to how you might want to match it with food.
That cheese and bread sounded pretty good, Hugh, après ski.
It's one of my favorite things to do, actually. Makes everything taste better.
Yeah, it does. Well, that was tremendous, Brittany. I don't know if we're over. I thought maybe we could just thank Coley and Scott both for their time, and of course, Hune, my colleague over at Adobe. Maybe we could pose some questions if there are any. We could either send them through chat, or maybe Brittany, you could help us manage that if there's anything coming through. But to Coley, Jess, and Hune, thank you very much for a tremendous conversation around data and using it in today's sort of empathetic marketing world, right? I think we've coined ourselves a new term, and the triangle from Scott. So we'll have to get those copywritten tonight.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
absolutely. Oh, sorry about that. Echoing everything you said, David. Thank you to all of our beer experts and our speakers today. And if everyone doesn't mind, I see a lot of folks are still on the line. So if there's any outstanding questions, I'd love to give everyone an opportunity to sort of open the floor and ask anything of either our speaker experts that have taken the time to do this with us today and or our beer experts. I know I have a question, but just wanted to let some other folks join in first.
I have a question for you, actually. When you're building these products over 20 years, obviously data is involved, right? You imagine, speak to us about that. How do you keep track of, I would imagine the hops is the primary ingredient, or because it's a crop and it grows differently. Could you talk to us a little bit how you analyze different crops that you use to make these products over 20 years, 30 years?
Well, it's, there's definitely data involved. I mean, you're also dealing, as you just alluded to, you're dealing with, agricultural products. So they're going to be different from year to year. And that's part of the brewing process, is that if you're going to get to any scale in beer, you have to be consistent, and consistency is difficult, especially when you're dealing with agricultural products. So part of the brewmaster's job is to be constantly tweaking the recipes based on the data that's coming in from the agricultural products, so that you end up with something that pretty much mirrors what it was supposed to be. So that's certainly part of it. The other part of it is data being driven in terms of marketing. I mean, there's 3 different sets of data that we crunch in the beer business. We have shipments, which is sales to wholesalers. We have depletions, which is sales from wholesalers to retailers. And then we have IRI data, which is scan data from the retailers. And you're trying to look at all of those components and try to figure out what makes sense, where the trend lines seem to be going as you're trying to develop new products. So it can, your eyes start going crazy after a little while. So it's crazy.
Patrick, is that how Trogs figured out the Boston market when you guys sort of took this place over?
In Boston? Yeah. I mean, we expanded to Boston before my time. And actually my boss, Jason Kidwell, who's VP of sales, was the sales rep up in that Boston area. And he just grew that business up there huge. So, it's one of our stronger markets, obviously home base. That Pennsylvania does about 60 to 65% of all our business. And kudos to Lance and the Maryland crew here. Maryland's actually our number 2 state by volume. When I started 5.5 years ago, Maryland was number 5. So happened to grow that very healthily to the number 2. And I kind of jabbed the New Jersey, Eastern PA regional sales manager from time to time, every time I can, to tell them that Maryland's number 2. So.
Are any of the supply chain issues going to cause inflation for my beer prices? Because that's a real question.
You can bet on it.
Yes, unfortunately.
Most definitely. Yeah.
And unfortunately, you guys are at the bottom of the barrel now because I don't want to hear the term supply chain ever again. In our industry, with the cost of goods, and you're looking at bottle caps, beer labels, glass, cans. I mean, you name it. Everything is going up across the board. And I'm sure you guys hear it. I mean, truck drivers aren't driving. There's less people there's less drivers on the road to move things around. And it's just, supply chain is a 4-letter word right now in the beer industry. So yeah, it's tough.
And I think that actually answers the question that Brittany put out in chat, which is she's heard, or people talk about this idea that data is the new oil. So removing the concept of a lubricant in the conversation of alcohol, there's the Irish plug once again. But Hune, think about it as a commodity where you can actually have data that allows you to know, in Patrick's case, maybe where the cheapest plastic purchase is, or maybe, quite honestly, where is the most available truck driver. If you look right now, they're fast. My friend is a Teamster truck driver in New England, and there's almost like an Uber sort of firm that's coming around. It's all data driven. To Patrick's point, they are now sort of on call and driving things because the standard schedules didn't work. So I guess a nice little plug there for where experience manager again, right, can provide some empathy.
Yes.
Real-time driven decisions.
Yeah,
on the
David.
operational side, right? Not just on the marketing side. but actually
Definitely.
on the
Definitely. And so I love, well, I don't, it's just tough to say because oil is a loaded remark. Maybe we'll start changing that in 2022. Data might be the new electricity, but it starts with data. And I think, again, I really mentioned this earlier to where what we understand about data, that's fundamentally shifting and changing so much. It used to be people only understood it as, oh, it's the first party stuff, or it's the offline stuff with my customers. No, it's only the online activity that's happening on my sites or in the app or in the digital world. And now we're actually seeing everything converge. And so regardless of the industry or sector you're in, so travel is a great example. I'm a Hyatt globalist, for instance, and what I do on my Hyatt app, what I do on Hyatt.com, what I do within Hyatt hotels around the world, all that is piecing together into my customer profile. And Hyatt can actually send me messages or engage with me based on all those things now. That's fair game. We go back to the dental example to where what I'm doing in one office in one state versus what I'm doing on site or what I'm doing even with the call center rep, those are all data points that come in. And so to all these companies, your data is your most valuable asset. And it's important to first make sure you're aware of it, you're capturing it, and you're storing it. And then when you get there, there are tools in place now to help you understand what to do with it. And I think that's where we see the value of solutions like the experience platform that come in to where you've onboarded all this data, you don't know what to do with it. So do I have to bring in a data scientist to manipulate and query it? Do I bring in marketers to figure out how to build out my audiences? Do I figure out where to send these things? But to even have those discussions, you need to first have the data piece. And then again, going back to even all these rules and governance and compliance, we place all those there. So if you know that certain information is sensitive or certain information shouldn't be used for certain channels, you can already build those guardrails and you're just focusing on empathizing with your customers, growing your business and engaging with your audiences. But again, that does start with data and then it goes back into bringing in more data.